guys, it's great to be here today. Why don't you guys tell me a little bit about what inspired Wonderbird and what it is we're doing here today?
We set out really to create a world class gin and do our best to highlight what Mississippi has to offer as far as agriculture and showing that really a great tasting and great executed gin can come out of here. Really, we came up with two gin recipes. Two recipes. One, the base spirit, the base alcohol, and then two, the botanical recipe for the gin itself. This launched in May of 2019, our flagship number 61 gin. It was a 61st recipe. We went through about 80 different recipes to land on that one.
So you talked about the base spirit versus the botanical blend, and talking about Mississippi agriculture. So what aspects of it make it unique, both in the base and in the botanical choices that you made?
We use a jasmine variety of rice grown in the Mississippi Delta. That is extremely unique. We're the only rice-based gin in the Western Hemisphere, one of only about 4 in the world. The rest are out of Japan. We set out to do a gin made from Mississippi agriculture, and we experimented with different varieties of corn and rice. And the reason rice is very unusual, but the reason we were interested in rice is because sake, as you know, this is sake that we're making this cocktail with, has the natural florality to it that we thought would be an interesting thing to experiment with as a gin base. And so really we started making just traditional sake, and then through that we realized that, hey, this one variety that was grown in the Delta makes a really great distillate, and the yield was good, meaning it made a good bit of alcohol, and so that's kind of what led us to making this decision. The mouthfeel of the gin is extremely unique. It's very silky, and the flavor is really, our base is this probably the smoothest 94% alcohol I've ever tasted.
We were always trying to make something as good as we could in every way. And what that meant for us when we really started to learn how to make alcohol was, hey, we've got to really look at this famous fertile agricultural state and figure out a really interesting fermentation substrate that will create a really interesting base alcohol and allow us to ultimately generate a product that's going to be excellent in every way and really reflect Mississippi's awesome agricultural history. I think the other thing to mention with respect to your question, however, is that 2 of our 10 botanicals are foraged from this property here, right? And in that way, when you combine that with the right choice, this truly can only come from just one place on Earth, and we really love that terroir kind of inclination.
Thank you. So do you want to tell me a little bit about what it is we're drinking here today?
Sure. So this is a martini, kind of a riff on a martini. We really built these gins to be great martini gins first and foremost. And this particular recipe was designed by the head of beverage at Momofuku in Las Vegas. And right when he tasted our gin, this was the first cocktail that came to mind, and we've loved it ever since. But it's an ounce of daiginjo sake and 2 ounces of gin, either the Magnolia or number 61. Really, they're both great in it. And a pinch of sea salt, and then stir until the sea salt dissolves, and then add ice, stir until chilled, garnish with an olive. It's kind of a riff on a dirty martini without any actual dirt. Has a nice salinity from the salt, and the daiginjo replaces vermouth, and it's a nice, very clean sake. Daiginjos are traditionally very clean and elegant, and they work well with the gin.
That is incredibly clean, and the finish is
Cheers.
cheers. First time having a martini with a sake substitute. It's amazing the expressions that I've seen in gin martinis using various vermouths, how they influence the gin. Having made this cocktail before, do you find that different sakes influence it as much as the vermouth does?
For sure.
Without question.
Yeah. You got to have a really clean daiginjo, because otherwise you start competing with what's going on in the gin, and to have a nice balance, you really want to really clean and crisp.
we take each of our botanical ingredients, and there are 10 here, and we do individual micro distillations of each because we can most precisely sort of manifest that one thing. I tell people it's like cooking. You know, if you want the onions to taste a certain way, you need to cook them by themselves, carrots, celery, etc., etc. Very similar here. So in terms of labor intensiveness, in terms of time and so on, we do take things a little further than your average distillery and do each of those botanicals individually.
When you were making the drink, you mentioned the Magnolia. Why magnolias? So we talked about the number 61, the base spirit or the base botanical blend. What inspired Magnolia?
So we were all talking about the Magnolia. Obviously, the Magnolia essence is just such a beautiful smell and aroma, and so we were really curious about how that would communicate over to a distillate. And a lot of things, they smell and look great, but then you distill them and they're awful. It depends on whatever you're using, whatever the substrate is, how it reacts to the alcohol, and heat, how it reacts to heat. Often, like if you're using certain flours, they turn to mush whenever you put hot alcohol vapor through them, and they can melt into the liquid. Or in other cases, like Magnolia, the result was this really beautiful distillate that we immediately, right when we tasted it, we're like, well, we got to make that from that. And so we really just built this gin to highlight that Magnolia Blossom distillate. And so it's just 10 botanicals in 61, and number 97, Magnolia Experimental, we did 5 botanicals. Way simpler, again, just to highlight that Magnolia Blossom distillate. And this one's Italian juniper, coriander, fresh Magnolia blossoms. We distill. The reason we only make this once a year is because we distill all the fresh Magnolia blossoms we can during the blooming season. You can't buy Magnolia blossoms. You can't dry them and use it. We distill them fresh. So we have 2-month period to distill all we can of the Magnolia blossoms that we have to harvest. And so we do that. That's our limiting quantity to how much of that gin we can make each year. And we add to that cinchona bark, which is a South American tree bark. It's like what quinine is derived from, what flavors tonic water, and a little bit of black peppercorn. But that's that gin, and it turned into a really wonderful martini gin. And it's also a little more punchy, a little bit more juniper, a little higher ABV, so it can hold up in different cocktails that this one maybe doesn't play well with.
So we have the 2 base blends. I know we've done a couple cask finishes with you guys so far, and I know you have a few projects in the works right now.
Right.
What can you tell me about the cask finish?
So yeah, I mean, you were a big part of us experimenting with cask initially, and so we've taken, like the first barrel we took Four Roses OESQ barrel.
It's been a few years.
Yep, yeah, it has. And loaded it with number 61, and the first one we did for 75 days, and the result was, all the complexity of the gin, yet added kind of spice and vanilla notes from the barrel. It was really interesting, a great replacement for any bourbon in an old fashioned or Manhattan. But also you could use it like a gin too, because you could taste all the complexity. Whereas the next barrel we did was a Eagle Rare barrel, and we did that for 165 days, so drastically different amount of time, and
over Mississippi summer,
right, and which definitely affects it. And the result was a very bourbon-esque gin. I mean, you didn't really taste all the complexity going on, but it was its own animal, and it was wonderful. And really even better for the bourbon replacement. You could really literally replace it in any bourbon cocktail. Maybe not play the same in gin for like a gin martini with it would be a little weird. But there was just a fantastic result there. And then so we've kind of we just did a Maker's Mark barrel that we're going to release here shortly. That we're really excited about. We did that for about 112 days. And it's the Maker's Mark, amazingly, I'm not a huge fan of Maker's Mark in general, but it was a great barrel for the gin. And then we're doing a Blanton's barrel as we speak, aging it now, and that one will probably be done here in, I don't know, a month or two. So it's an exciting, different world. I mean, the bourbon barrels play with the gin in a totally different way and we're going to be expanding the distillery soon. And so what we're talking about doing is maybe a bourbon barrel kind of line, because that's a totally different deal. Whereas all the time offered cask finished gin, because of the inconsistency between bourbon barrels and what, which bourbon it is or whatever, for that all the time cask finish would really be more interesting to kind of a new barrel of our own, and whatever wood species we decide on, and see, and kind of make the two different products out of it. But
we love the one-off, interesting pedigree,
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
thing. But it makes 232 bottles, right? So they are true one-offs, and that's super fun. What Shan's saying is there may be a future where we have both things, more of a routinized, bigger production where we've done the cooperage and made all those decisions, and then the one-off.
And the one-ofs are what I think it makes it so unique, because at the end of the day, they are single barrels. They are gin single barrels. You don't see a lot of those out there.
Absolutely.
But I would love to see a wood finished series.
Right.
I can only imagine some of the things you could do. Some of my favorite cachaças are typically done in like acacia wood or something. So it'd be really interesting to see what different flavor profiles you can bring out in gin by experimenting with different wood finishes. Now, talking about the concept of finishes, I'm curious what you think. Like, I love the concept of cask finish, doing the different, lengths of time. But what do you think about cask finish versus like barrel aging, where you see some of these gins on the market that are being aged 1, 2, 5, 8 years?
We haven't talked much about this together, right? But I have my own opinion. And I've tasted a lot of these gins aged 1 to 7 years or whatever, and most of the ones I've had over 1 start to get over oak pretty fast, because they're normally doing white oak is what I've seen. But I don't know. The gin is such a delicate thing in general. In my opinion, I would rather keep it gin and add something to it versus completely wipe out what it is.
What we've seen with these bourbon barrels, we're on our 4th experiment, is 100 days in, you've seen pretty significant change to the ultimate product. So what 7 years does for you, interesting. I would never say no, and there are a lot of smart people doing a lot of cool experiments out there. What we've seen, to me, doesn't necessarily motivate me to see what a 5-year experiment would do.
You mentioned, in the process of expansion, up until where you're at now, obviously I assume volume is one of the big driving factors in the need for expansion.
Right.
Along with expansion, we're talking about maybe new wood finishes. Is the expansion solely looking at amping up volume of production, or are there other plans to maybe go along with the expansion?
I think yes. So volume definitely, but then also it allows us to have the space to do more variety. So to do a more regular cask finished program. So to have right now we pretty much run 2 barrels at a time in there, and we'd be able to have a lot more than that, and be able to do some of the, like we're talking about, the new wood, and then also to do really more of the experimentals. Our goal with the experimentals was to do 1 a year and playing with a new botanical each year.
There are worlds, because bartenders and bev directors ask us this all the time. If you do each of your botanicals individually, would you ever sell individual distillates, right? So, a cinchona distillate or a black telecherry peppercorn distillate. I think there are worlds where we would consider doing those products because they are very interesting and very pretty. So yeah, we know that the way this business is headed, we needed to expand.
I can say just from my travels, I've seen Wonderbird popping up in more and more cities and states. Now I've been excited to see kind of the footprint as it's continued to grow, and just some of the accolades and recognitions that you guys have picked up in such a short time. So now I'm excited to see what comes next.
Thank you.
We are too.
We are too.
And really appreciate your partnership and support.
Definitely.
The whole way.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Love working with you guys. Love the product, and love the cocktail as well.